Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by the amazing Steve Roman. Steve, how you doing today, brother?
Good. It's nice and hot up in New Jersey, just like you, but we're getting through it.
Yeah, man, we're cooking here as well. I do want to say first off that it's amazing that you and I were able to meet up. Obviously, through some mutual friends, like not just horror. We were able to make this connection. So I want to throw a shout out to D real quick. Thank you for helping us out in this endeavor. A little bit about you, Steve. You are a headwear designer for Fright Rags, which is the dopest thing ever. I love Fright Rags. I love Ben. So anybody that's works with Ben is definitely good people. Growing up, your passion was always for watching movies, making artwork, and playing with various toys. And those hobbies actually fueled your passion for storytelling and molded you into who you are today. Now, as the creative director, as the lead headwear designer for Fright Rags, you have the opportunity to create products for fans that you hope they love as much as you do creating it. And putting those details and Easter eggs that keep fans appreciating the connection is what really honestly keeps you going, like a natural high. And the thing for me is Fright Rags is such a well-known company in the horror world, and it's such an amazing company ran by amazing people that do amazing things. What was it like for you to land this gig with Fright Rags?
That's actually really cool because I wanted to tell my story. And I hope it inspires other people as well, because for years I've been a fan of Fright Rags myself. And, I bought the t-shirts, and Ben is just the thing about him that separates himself and the brand from anyone else is he engages in every comment and he really cares and he wants to make sure that people are really satisfied with what we do. And, as a fashion designer, I was in licensing, and as a customer of Ben, I would do horror stuff as well. And I wanted to share my ideas with him. And just as hey, this is what I'm doing on my side. And as another creative, it's not really about competition. It's about really just being aware of what people are doing in unison, because what he does is different to what I was doing a long time ago. And it came to a point where I was leaving my job, and I had sent him some Friday the 13th stuff that I designed. And I was like, hey man, I really like this. I feel like you would really appreciate it. And sure enough, the day that I told him that I was moving on, he asked me if I was interested in designing for Fright Rags. And we had an opportunity to meet at Monster Mania. I feel like Monster Mania is a special place because I feel like that's where everyone gets together and meets for the first time. And we went out to lunch. I showed him a whole presentation of what I thought I could do for Fright Rags, and I showed him some samples and my vision, and we shook hands. And 3 years later, these guys are like family to me, and we're working week by week, just developing for the next year, for the next couple of months. And it's a dream come true. It's a very humbling experience because I get to do something on such a bigger magnitude, and I get to read these comments on how people love what we make. So it makes the hard work not seem so hard all the time.
Right. And like you said, the familial atmosphere. I've had the opportunity to talk to Ben a couple different times, and he is truly a gentleman. And I can just imagine the two of you working together and the amazing things you guys create. And everybody knows me. I'm a huge fan of Fright Rags. So being able to talk to somebody like yourself that's really into the creative process is something that's really special to me. But that's not your only gig, man. Let's talk about the podcast a little bit. So horror movies obviously mean a lot to you. Can you talk to us about your podcast a little bit?
Sure. I mean, right here, I help with my friends. We do Bat Force Radio. We have a big Instagram presence, about 155K followers. There's about 9 of us. So it's just a constant moving, multifaceted kind of team. But it's all about Batman. But we do a lot of stuff with DC. And we also have a lot of artists that are creators now, get to talk to us about upcoming projects. And we also do book reviews. So to me, as a fan, I'm like blown away because I get to talk to my favorite DC artists. And when you go to like Comic Cons, they know us, they see the t-shirt, they cut out some time for us. So it's amazing. It's a cool opportunity. But just like Fright Rags and the horror community, it's such a big scape of things. But at the end of the day, it's really a small community. Everyone knows each other. everyone really supports each other for the most part. Even with horror, like I was telling you before behind the scenes the other day, like it's just about the passion, and
Yeah.
people love the thing about Fright Rags too is like I Googled a shirt that I was looking for. Night of the Creeps is one of my favorite movies of all time. And at that time, Ben had released one, and I was blown away by the unique artwork style that he did and the quality. And that was one of my first Fright Rags t-shirts that I still have, of course. And it's different, you know. He has a small team, they're a family, and they really care about this massive community. And they're growing. They're more than a t-shirt company. You know, they're doing toys, they're doing plushies, they're doing hats, socks. It's like it kind of blew my mind when I had the opportunity to meet him the first time at Monster Mania. I sat with them, and to see people embrace him the way that they do, it's almost like, man, it's like it's so touching. It's like the fact that I get a little opportunity to kind of showcase my work on that stage is beyond humbling for me. And when people say, "Holy shit, you made this hat, can I take a picture with you?" I'm just like, no, I'm excited that you spent your hard-earned money on this stuff. But it's something that Ben and I and the rest of the team, when I have an idea, it's very closely articulated and crafted. Like this is one of my favorite hats of all time. This
Jaws, baby.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorites, and we ended up reordering this, and people were just like asking for more. And it's just a unique piece. I want people to feel like they're wearing a piece of art on them, or you know, if they want to buy two, maybe they have it on their shelf and it's a display piece because it tells a story. You know, it's like this is torn up, this is aged. I want to feel like this was found in a shipyard 30 years ago, and it's disgusting, but it's new, you know. So there's a lot of TLC, a lot of attention to details that I like to pride myself. Then I think that no one else in the horror game does this type of stuff. There's a lot of t-shirts that, you know, a lot of awesome art styles, but we really try to tell a story with every product that we do. And it's important to us. Like we don't send anything that we are not completely in love with, that we know that people will love themselves. So.
Well, and the good thing about that is if you guys haven't checked out Fright Rags yet, I can't recommend it enough. And I do have the links down here in the description, as well as the links for Steve's podcast, as well as the links for his social media. So make sure you're checking all this out. And, you know, to me, there's a lot of people that are in the horror community that absolutely despise superhero stuff. And I grew up, my parents owned a video store called Downtown Video. And right next door to that, my cousin owned Tim's Cards and Comics. So when I wasn't at the video store, I was over thumbing through my, you know, through baseball cards, through comic books. And to me, as a collector in general, like I still got my long boxes over in my room. You know, I grew up with, I remember January of 1993, standing outside, I believe it was 93, standing outside my cousin's comic book store, waiting for him to open so I could get the final issue of Death of Superman.
I know you're going to see Superman, because anyone waiting outside for a long time, that's one of those weird books where it's just, as a kid, you're like, wow, they printed this multiple runs just so people could have it in their hands. It's something that you'll never experience in your life.
I still got the sealed one that's sealed with just the black bag and the S on it. And it's, you know, and I have, obviously I had an open one too. They had the poster, the Death in the Family poster. They had the whole Justice League carrying the casket and the newspaper clipping. Yeah, Funeral for a Friend, not Death in the Family. We were talking about Death in the Family a minute ago, but yeah, Funeral for a Friend. I'm sorry. Yeah, these are all things that I think, like, as collectors, I've always been drawn to as well. I think that you know, the comic book world, like you said, is much like the horror world. You know, you have comic cons where people dress up like their favorite superheroes. You have horror cons where people dress up like their favorite horror. I hate saying icons, but you know, their favorite horror characters. So it's all very closely knit. It's a very close knit community between both communities. And even though it can be hit or miss sometimes, we all love each other. Now, I do want to say again, the link for the Fright Rags and his social media is in the description. Make sure you guys are checking out Fright Rags. I can't recommend Fright Rags enough. It's definitely my favorite horror clothing brand. I love the fact that I've gotten to talk with some of the most amazing people in the community being a part of Fright Rags. And even this friendship I've developed with Steve, this isn't just something where, hey, let's do a podcast. Let's do it. I've been talking to Steve for the last week and a half and genuinely enjoying learning about him and all that. So now I want to go back to the past, Steve. And what the amazing thing is, I'm over 300 episodes now. This will be the first time I've talked about this movie. So
Cool.
for the first time, we're going to talk about this
I'm
film
a little
now.
too old then, you know, maybe I'm a little older than the average bear as your average fan, but that's cool.
I've talked about the one before it. I've talked about the one after it. So I've talked about the sandwich bread.
Yeah.
Never talked about the meat, my friend. So your first horror movie was
Poltergeist II. So this is not by coincidence, one of my first Fright Rag shirts. I think it was done by Justin Osborne. It's an incredible movie. You know, I was a fan of the other ones. Third is kind of forgettable in my head, but Poltergeist 2 is the one that really scared the shit out of me. And I gave
Reverend Kane.
I gave it another spin the other day because I wanted to have some talking points, and also, hey, I'm a little older. I can kind of handle it now. And I try to kind of see it through the eyes of the 8-year-old me, because what made me so scared about this? Obviously, it's overly CGI'd now, but it still has that eeriness and the creepiness that I loved as a little kid. That hopefully eventually I'll let my daughter see. Not, you know, she's way past 8, but I don't know if she's ready for it because it's fucking creepy, man.
Dude, I just watched this movie again last night because, like, it's funny. Growing up, like, I always really, really liked part 1. Part 3, you said it's forgettable. Part 3 is my favorite, personally. Like, that's the one I watched the most growing up.
Then, because I'm being biased, because I loved how Reverend Kane looked, and obviously,
there
was that
the 1 and 3
where it had new actors, or you know, right after that. But yeah, the idea of
watching this last night, like, holy shit, this movie is so much better than I remember it being. I don't know if it's because I was young and maybe, you know, I just watched it at the wrong time, but this movie is so scary. And there's certain parts of this movie that I think are super effective, and they're overly effective, especially to a young boy. So of those scenes, which one do you think affected you the most?
The one that always hit me when I was younger was when the mother Diane was urged to kind of like tap into her, I'm probably gonna mess it up, clairvoyancy, and because they all have a gift, everyone in that family, but they don't, you know, obviously Carol Ann is the one that really is starting to really develop this, but the mom has these abilities to kind of have a flashback of what happened in that burial ground, which is remotely close to where they live or underneath. And they start having these visions of Reverend Kane trapping his cult members, or these helpless people that he promised them that he had this prophecy, and obviously didn't happen. Yeah. He traps them in there. They all die. Their children, their women, and he didn't let them go, and they all die there. And now he's this demon that transforms into different he's not really different iterations. He's normally this reverend, but he's represented in different things, and that's what's so creative, and that's why I love films like Nightmare on Elm Street, because it's all about your fear and your perception of what you think is scary. And it's through these different things where the father, he's stressed out from the last movie. He's like, damn, we lost our house. We have no money, and insurance said that the house disappeared. So now we're living in this house.
Because now the house is missing.
Yeah, the house is missing, so you can't claim it. So he has this demon with alcoholism, and there's this scene where with the tequila monster where that's temptation. That's Reverend Kane. He takes that worm in, and now he becomes a part of a possessed Reverend Kane, and eventually the worm is spewed out of him, and you see that shape-shifting Reverend Kane. And to me, man, in the 80s, that's craftsmanship. Like, wow, that's not CGI'd. That is just insane. It's really a piece of art, like, especially in the beginning, where he's kind of slowly having that presence where you see him walking around and he's real, but then there's parts where people walk through him, and it's all about that supernaturalness of the story. And it's creepy. There's not much that he does. That's why Phantasm is so cool too. But Reverend Kane is just, it's about your temptation. It's about your breaking your will down and letting him in. So creepy as shit.
What I love about that is, like, you see the part, like you said, where Kane is walking through people. Right. And even before that, you see Grandma walk up to Carol Ann while Carol Ann's drawing on the table, and she's literally drawing a picture of Reverend Kane.
Right.
And at this point, we haven't seen him yet. So the first time you see him, you already know shit's going down. So, like you said, that's the beautiful cinematography that they did here. So, we know which scene affected you the most. And like I said, there's a lot of effective scenery in this movie. But what would you say your favorite scene from Poltergeist 2 would be?
I do like the tequila monster is always my favorite because it's just funny. But the scene with the braces is cool, where he kind of he's getting ready and it just submerses him in like the spider web. I like that for the special effects aspect of it. But Tequila Monster is cool when he starts crawling out into the way, and then they open up the door and he's gone. So man, it's just creepy as hell, and it's kind of realistic. It's really realistic looking, but it's funny from an older perspective. The movie went a lot faster for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like towards the end, like I don't want to say it's anticlimactic, but I feel like it's a typical 80s movie where it's just a sharp ending and they go through the porthole, they're fighting, they work as a family. Even the father's discovering himself through the shaman Taylor, and he receives this spirit that he uses to fight Kane at the end. So I kept thinking about Stranger Things. I was like, man, seeing Stranger Things over the weekend, and it's like, man, what are these inspirations coming from these classic movies? And
lots of parallels there.
For sure.
I
was thinking and all that cool stuff, just the demons.
Oh yeah. And one other thing you just brought up is like you're watching it now as an adult, and like you watch the scene with Carol Ann at the table, and she's like, I don't know if I want to grow up. Being grown up just doesn't seem fun. And to know that little girl ended up losing her life a couple years later due to a medical misdiagnosis, like watching that scene last night really, really hit me. I was like, oh man, like that's so rough to go back. Obviously, nobody could have ever known something like that would happen. But you go back and you watch that scene and you're just like, oh no, that's so heartbreaking to hear now. Like this little girl that was taken due to literally a medical misdiagnosis, something that, could have been avoided. But you watch that scene now as an adult and a parent.
I think one of the sisters had died from the first, right?
She was her boyfriend.
Right. The boy, the son, we had met her at a Chiller Theater Con years ago, and I think that was actually his real sister in real life or something like that. Mm-hmm. There's some kind of connection. And I had asked him about, everyone's always interested in on what happened with that movie, because when you're that young, you start hearing people die. You're like, holy shit, like 2 or 3 people died from that movie. Like you start thinking more, you can't wrap your head around that.
Yeah. And that's so heartbreaking for, and like you said, the sister died from a crazy boyfriend. Carol Ann died from a medical misdiagnosis. The guy, I can't think of his name right now, that played Reverend Kane, died of cancer. Right. And, it always gets put on the curse. But man, to me, it's a series of unfortunate events. You can't plan for a curse. Doesn't happen because of a crazy man. A curse doesn't happen because of a medical misdiagnosis. It's a better story for sure.
Man, it really adds to that narrative.
It really, really does. So one question I've been asking recently, we talk about, obviously Poltergeist has had a remake, the original.
Sure.
Would you like to see them carry that on and remake Poltergeist 2 today?
I would say yes. I think right now, I want to guess maybe that remake was 5 years ago. You can always just do it, but maybe they need to do a reboot where it's kind of, or maybe it's an homage, a nod to Part 2 and bring Kane in there, because he's highly underdeveloped. He's underrated. He could be, in 1 or 2 movies where he's just creepy. There's so much more. There's more manifestations that you can do with technology to really make this guy really interesting and a shapeshifter. Mm-hmm. And there's not much to him, and that's what makes him so scary. And Phantasm, Tall Man reminds me of that, but Reverend Kane is on another level to me, because Tall Man is really tall and lanky, but Reverend Kane, he's very frail and he has those blue eyes. He looks skeletal. And then when he has these like very stark, very, very soft voice, and then he'll start screaming, and you're like, as a kid, it really hits you.
Oh yeah. I mean, even me watching it yesterday, like I was genuinely like, man, this guy is creepy as shit. Because whenever I think of Reverend Kane, obviously I watched Poltergeist 3 the most as a kid. So I think of Reverend Kane from part 3.
Mhm.
But obviously the guy from part 2 passed on, but he was scary, man. Like that guy, he is scary. Like when he
I
goes to
do
the house and
remember
he's
watching it, and now that we're talking about it, I'm definitely going to revisit it because I do have it on my iTunes.
Mhm.
I got to give it another shot because with horror, it's like, hey, you have every time you watch it a few years later, you gain a new perspective. You're inspired by other
right.
things, and as you're older, it's like, oh shit, I get it. It makes sense to me.
And it's just harder with that one because that Heather O'Rourke, the girl who played the young Caroline, died during filming, so they had to throw an ending on it.
Wow.
And the ending is, and I love watching. I don't know if you have Shutter or not, but they have cursed
Just,
films on Shutter.
right. That's the first thing I
And
was thinking about when we were talking before the three
yeah,
curses, and you're just like, yeah, obviously Poltergeist is on there.
hmm well, I love in there how they have the director of Poltergeist 3, and he's talking about how they didn't even want to finish the film. They were like, we just lost Heather. This is done. And the studio was like, nope, we put too much money into it. You're going to finish the film. So they just wrote this really shitty ending and put it on there. And he's like, in retrospect, I wish we would have done more to honor Heather, put a better ending on this film to honor her. He's like, all she got was a for Heather at the end, and that's so sad. But at the time, everyone was just bitter that they had to finish this movie that they didn't want to finish because they were heartbroken over the loss of this young lady. So
it's a
I
big
could
amount of
definitely see both
exposure.
sides.
Yeah. And I would have to say, like, again, I've seen it years ago. I think the way that they did it with the remake, it was a pretty cool homage to her.
Mhm.
The girl looked very similar. I'll have to rewatch it again now that I'm in that kind of mind frame to kind of pick
Yeah.
it apart. But again, Poltergeist, it was still enjoyable. I could see why I was really scared from it. It has this over the top feeling when you see these ghosts coming in, and even though the CGI could get a little cheesy towards the end, it's thinking about it afterwards that makes it so scary. Because how far of it from the truth is it? Even though it looks over the top, like it's
I'm sure
basically
if we were in that situation, it wouldn't look too down to earth either.
yeah.
So, Steve, we talked about Poltergeist 2 for a movie and what it means to you. But now my little buddy Ghostface here has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Steve? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Whew. I'm a little torn, but I grew up a slasher kid, 80s, so Jason is my favorite icon. So out of those, I do love Final Chapter. That's the one that I just saw on repeat. Like I mentioned to you, like our generation, you didn't have exposure to a lot of films nowadays. It's like, what did your dad record on HBO the past month? And you watched the hell out of it. So I fell in love with Jason between the first and second grade. And my parents, I went to Catholic school. My parents let me dress up as him. And I thought it was the coolest thing. And it was off, I had a bubble vest with a mask. It was probably a cleaver,
Right.
but I felt empowered. I'm like, man, he's so cool. I love Friday the 13th, but like I mentioned before, I love Night of the Creeps too. It's very just it's a cool nod to the era. It's very fun. Um, a lot of these 80s movies, there's an innocence to some of them too. It's kind of it's campy, but that's why we go back to them all the time. They're not so serious. But yeah, I love Halloween as well. 1 and 2 are my faves. I've grown to love 2018 a lot as well. Um,
Mhm.
I love that we can revamp these stories from all these years and bring in all these new fans. That's
Yeah.
what it's about.
Well, and I've been saying this lately on the podcast. Like one thing that we got to remember is even if we're anti-remake and remakes are not really our thing, remakes do bring a new audience to the older film.
Right.
When Halloween 2018 came out, while granted it's not a remake, it's a reboot, actually a sequel. They do. I think the sales. I have to look it back up, but the sales on Halloween 78, like the sales and streaming on that went up like 700%. when Halloween 2018 came out, because people that had never seen the original went back and watched it. So even if you're anti-remake, it could still shed light onto the original film. And I think that's something very special that we could take for granted.
Yeah, I mean, coming from the licensing world where I make product, it's like you want to celebrate both sides. It's like, where did this come from? What are the origins? Why do we love it? What's the original inspiration? And how does it change?
Right. And it's there's some remakes I very much enjoy. I really love the Evil Dead 2013. I love Child's Play 2019. I think those are both absolutely amazing remakes. And if you want to look at how to do a remake, those are the two films I would point you to, because they take the insides of the original, but they put their own skin over top of it. It's nothing like the original. So that's what I love about them. Now, Steve, before I let you go, we're going to bounce back to Poltergeist 2. And what we're going to do, my friend, is we're going to rank this on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking this movie on acting or score, production, curses, nothing like that. What we're doing here is strictly ranking this movie on how much it affected you on first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. What would your ranking of Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, be?
I'll do 4.5.
Fair.
For sure.
That's a fair ranking. Well, you talked about it earlier, man, but that braces scene alone, like watching that again last night, I was like, man, this is one of the biggest scenes that I can remember from being a kid, was seeing those braces start coming out. Like, oh, it's so sick.
And I feel like it was like not in the middle of the day, but it was like not quite nighttime. He's just getting ready for dinner and shit's going down. And everyone is just hanging out in the family room. And I'm like, man, they're really doing it to this kid. Like,
and they're all having a good time, His dad's on the phone acting like he's talking to the insurance company with Carol Ann's toy phone, like they're all having a good time. And then Robbie's up there going ham. And was it Taylor? He comes in and he's just holding Carol Ann, and he's like, he doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about him. This is what he wants right here.
Right.
So it's definitely fun to go back and rewatch these movies, especially if we haven't watched them in a long time, to get a new respect on them. And I try to do that before every single one of these episodes. So we are at the end of the third act, my friend. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. Now, before it does, there's some links down here in the description that need clicking. So you guys need to get on that. Steve, don't go anywhere, my friend. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.